Welcome to XYZN Wellness. This is Elisa, and I'm so glad you were able to join me for another practice today. To get started, we're going to do a little bit of alternate nostril breathing, and this is a great way to kind of give ourselves a little bit of calm, a little bit of peace, especially if we're stressed out. I might do this sometimes at night if I'm having a difficult time falling asleep. But the reason why this works so well is because with switching how we breathe from one nostril to the other, it actually kind of connects the two sides of our brain and helps really to soothe and settle the nervous system. So it's really quite simple. And as I mentioned, when I do this at night to fall asleep, a lot of times I won't use my fingers, but what you can do to make it easier is to use your fingers. It's typically done with your right hand, but if you're left-handed, you can feel free to switch it up a little bit. And to close off your right nostril, you would use your thumb. And then when we switch and close off the left nostril, you could use your ring finger or your ring finger and your pinky. Some people will put a couple fingers, their index and middle finger on their forehead, or they'll curl them down. So it's whatever's most comfortable for you, and you might have to play around with it for a couple of times just to see what works best for you. And we're going to do a few rounds of this. And again, it's really helpful to calm the body. Some people I know will do this right before a competition. So for instance, I love to run. So this is a great way to calm any pre-race nerves, or for any other type of competitions you might do, or if you maybe have a big phone call or a big meeting coming up, this is something you could do. But we'll get started. So we'll first take a big in breath, and then exhale. We'll do just a couple more breaths like that. And then if you'd like, just coming back to your normal breath whenever you're ready. And so to get into the alternate nostril breathing, we'll inhale, closing off the right, or actually the left nostril. We'll inhale on the right. And then closing off the right, opening the left, we'll exhale. Inhaling. Closing the left, opening the right to exhale. Staying there to inhale. Switching sides. Then continuing at your own pace. So in essence, we're exhaling and then inhaling on the same side. Before switching over to the other side. We'll do one more round to each side, ending with an exhale on the right side. And when you're ready, just bringing your hands to your lap. Palms can be face up or face down. And we'll take a few moments to notice the breath, noticing maybe how you feel right now. Maybe you feel a little more centered and balanced. Maybe one side felt a little more natural than the other, or if you're experiencing any stuffiness, you might be aware of one side more than the other. And we'll just notice any sensations in the body, being aware of any tightness or achiness maybe. Feel some tightness in the shoulders if you're particularly tense or stressed, and inviting the breath into those places and really inviting a sense of relaxation. So if the shoulders are crunched up around the ears, relaxing them back and down. Inviting the breath to bring a sense of expansion and space anywhere else that you might need it. Inhaling, creating that sense of space, and exhaling, letting go of anything that no longer serves you, letting go of expectations and judgments, letting go of competition, letting go of those judgments against anybody else, but especially against ourselves. And the same thing goes for that competition. Sometimes we compete with other people, but sometimes we compete with an idealized version of ourselves or those expectations we place on ourselves. So setting all of that aside for just today, letting ourselves be just as we are and allowing and accepting. And for today's practice, we're going to think about a word, or I'll share a word with you. It's called Ahimsa. And in yoga, Ahimsa means non-harming. It's a Sanskrit word. And when we say non-harming, we mean not only not to harm somebody else, but especially not to harm ourselves. So as we move through the practice, as you select options, always selecting the options that fit your body today. So not needing to push, not needing to force. So maybe even thinking about what that word ahimsa means to you in ways that you can care for yourself and take care for yourself. As we take just another breath or two right here with the eyes still closed. And then as you're ready, we'll bow the chin towards the chest, feeling the back of the neck elongate, letting the head hang heavy. And then very slowly allowing the eyes to flutter open, letting your gaze first come down towards the floor, and then bringing the chin parallel to the floor. So we've been in our seat for a little while. You might be seated like I am, or you could have been cross-legged. But if you'd like, maybe shifting positions. And especially if you were on your knees like me, you might want to just let the knees drop from one side to the other, bring a little bit of circulation into the legs. And then we're going to come back to our seat. So any seated position that you'd like. So you could go back to that kneeling position or cross-legged, or perhaps sitting up on any type of support. So I have a bolster here, but you might have a couch cushion or a pillow from your bed, maybe a yoga block. And remembering when we sit up on a support, it helps us to protect that natural curve of the lumbar spine, helps us to lengthen the spine and have the natural curves. So especially if you find yourself slumping back, then it might be really helpful to sit up on something. And we're going to start connecting mind, body, and breath. So we'll inhale, sweeping arms out and overhead, and then exhaling, hands come to the heart. Inhaling, lifting, making this movement as big or as small as you would like today. And remembering that word ahimsa. So if this creates any discomfort in your shoulders or your neck, making this movement yours. So if you want to make this movement smaller, or maybe coming to cactus arms, inhaling, creating expansion. So cactus arms, even though this looks like a smaller movement, is a really nice way to open the chest and the shoulders, and squeezing the back of the shoulders together, getting a little bit of a back bend. So we spend a lot of our daily activities hunching forward, and now with this movement, we can open wide. But if you're feeling good, sweeping arms overhead, you could stay right there. We're just finding that connection between mind, body, and breath. So for the full inhale, the arms either sweep overhead or out to the side. And then for the full exhale, we bring hands back. to heart center. We'll continue here a few times, so any arm variation that you'd like. And the next time, we're going to turn this into a twist. So now we might have that sweeping motion up, inhaling up, and then exhaling to twist to one side. Inhaling forward, and then exhaling, twisting, turning from the belly button, letting the chest and the shoulders follow. Head and neck turn last. And then just as we did when we were facing the front, you can adjust your arms if you need to. So some people might like to have that cactus arms here and just turn from one side to the other. Or maybe even bringing hands to shoulders. So remembering our Ahimsa, non-harming. And adjusting your movements to fit how you feel in this moment. And remembering that doesn't always mean taking the easy way out. We don't have to phone in our yoga practice. So it's okay to challenge ourselves, but it's also okay to honor our bodies. So choosing a little bit more when we need a little more, or choosing a little less when we need a little less. We'll do just one more time to each direction now that we've warmed up our spines. Gotten that nice little rotation for the torso. And then exhaling, hands come down next to the body. We'll lift off of our support, setting it to the side. And again, maybe finding some windshield wipers. So placing our hands behind our bodies, behind our backs, fingertips can be pointed away, and knees can be about hip width or maybe wider apart, feet as well, as we find that side-to-side motion once again. You might really enjoy how this feels into your hip flexors. And a lot of times my students will move through this movement really quickly, and that might feel good to you, but a lot of times I like to move through this very slowly so I can really enjoy that opening I'm getting into my hips. So again, honoring your body, moving the legs from side to side, opening not only through the hip flexors, but all throughout the pelvis and the low back. And we carry a lot of tension and tightness into the hips. So that can take a while to undo. So really enjoying that, just starting to create some openness. And especially if you're feeling any tightness in the low back, this is a good move to start off your practice. And then just one more time to each direction or so. And then we'll make our way onto hands and knees. So stacking hands directly underneath shoulders, maybe making fists for wrists if you have any wrist discomfort. If not, spreading those fingers wide into starfish fingers. Knees are under hips, and if you'd like to add some cushioning there, feeling free to do that as well. We'll inhale, letting the belly drop as we extend the heart forward into cow pose. Exhaling, we're going to drop the tailbone now and round through the spine, chin to chest for cat. Inhaling, the belly drops, shoulders draw in towards one another. And then exhaling, reversing that. Mid-back reaches up towards the top of the sky. So we already moved through a twist for the spine, and now we're moving the spine through flexion and extension. So we're getting into all those vertebrae, and we're starting down at the base of the spine, moving one vertebra at a time. Trying to let the head and the neck move last. We'll do just one more round like this. And then from here, we're going to come into a move that I like to call wag the tail or happy dog. So we're inhaling at center, and then as we exhale, we're going to look over the left shoulder towards the left foot, shortening that left side of the body. And we'll inhale, and we'll exhale to look over the right side. So one side gets longer, one side gets shorter, and now we're laterally flexing the spine. This can feel really good into the side body. And as we're moving through this movement, you can stay just as you are. Sometimes it might feel nice to extend one leg, so bringing the foot, crossing it to the other side. And only adding that in if that feels good to your body. So it's just a way to add to that sensation. And then if you decide that you were feeling a better sensation or it felt better to your spine, you might come back to cat and cow. Or you can wag your tail with both knees on the ground. Another option is to add in some more circles. So we might even play around with where we placed our hands and maybe circling the hips, starting small and maybe making that bigger. And then anytime we circle, always making sure to circle in both directions. So as we're moving through these options on hands and knees or tabletop, choosing what feels best to you in this moment. And it'll change from day to day. Some days one of the movements might feel better than the other, but finding what feels good right now. Maybe returning to that cat and cow or any of the other options we did, or there might be a place that your body just naturally wants to go. We'll stay here for just another breath or two. And then coming through tabletop, we'll bring big toes together. We're going to sit our hips back in the child's pose. Knees can be wide to make space for the belly. And bring your forehead down to the floor if it makes it all the way there. Or if not, you could take that pillow or couch cushion, or maybe the backs of the hands underneath the forehead. And adding cushioning anywhere else you may need it. So you might want some cushioning under the knees or between the calves and the thighs. And if this doesn't feel good, coming back to that tabletop pose. So for some of us, this is a very restful pose, and for some of us, not so much. So choosing a place where you can be a little restful for a moment or two as we check in with the body and checking in with the breath and noticing maybe any differences in how we're feeling from when we first started the practice. We'll take one or two more breaths right here. And then extending arms in front of the body, we're going to take another opportunity for lateral flexion through the spine. So we'll walk both hands towards the left edge off the side of the mat to the floor and crawling those right fingertips forward, feeling a nice stretch all throughout the intercostal muscles along the right side of the torso, maybe even all the way down into the hip or the lower back, the QL on the right side of the body. Walking hands across center. And then over to the right side, inching those fingertips forward, again feeling that elongation all through the left side of the body. Inhaling, we'll come back to center, choosing to stay here in child's pose, or if you'd like, we can lift into downward facing dog. So for downward dog, we'll crawl the fingertips towards the top of the mat. If knees were wide, we'll bring them back into alignment with the hips. Curling toes under. We'll press the hands into the mat as we lift hips towards the sky. Pressing down through the hands, creating Hasta Bandha as we root down through all 10 fingers, especially the palms as well. And then maybe walking your dog. So to walk our dog, we can lift one heel, really bending that knee, letting the other heel drop to the floor. And then slowly switching from one side to the other. Waking up the bottoms of the feet and the toes. getting into Achilles tendons, calf muscles. Letting our gaze come back towards our feet, making sure they're about hip width apart. So staying here for just another breath or two. And as we stay here for just another moment, we'll come into stillness, pressing the chest back towards the heart. Still keeping that connection between our hands, that firm foundation and the ground, feeling the ground pressing back up. And then lowering knees down to the floor. Untucking the toes, we'll shift our hips back in the child's pose. Starting to flow through our half series or our vinyasa flow, we'll inhale forward, either coming to table or stacking knees, actually shoulders over wrists, coming into kneeling plank, pushing that floor away from us, and then exhaling back. Inhaling to come forward, keeping integrity in the core, so lifting through that strong core center, and then exhaling back. So as we exhale back and inhale forward, thinking about the belly button and maybe moving from your belly button. So rather than rushing through this movement and not really connecting to the body, thinking about the strength that we're creating as we do this really simple flow forward and back. And as we inhale forward, pushing that floor away from us, we're in the top of a push-up. Shoulders are over the wrist, but we're creating a straight line. So a plank of wood down towards the knees, and then exhaling back. Either staying here, or we can start to maybe add in options on toes. So we can lift back into that downward facing dog if that feels appropriate for today. And then as we inhale forward, coming into a plank on toes, or we could lower those knees. Shifting back into down dog or child's pose, and then inhaling forward. We'll do this just a couple more times. Choosing your variation, and it can change from one time to the next. If you're coming to plank on toes, firming through the thighs and still keeping our connection through the core. So we want to move forward and back from the belly button. Keeping that integrity in the spine, moving as if we were a plank of wood. So one more time like this. And then we'll all shift back into a downward facing dog. Lifting those hips to the sky, engaging root lock, Mula Bandha. So we'll think about lifting through the pelvic floor, engaging through the thighs. So you might imagine that the inner thighs are drawing towards one another. And then we'll inhale to look forward. Exhaling, we'll take a walk to the front of our mats, forward fold. Staying here in a little bit of a ragdoll, maybe swaying gently from side to side or holding on to our elbows. Releasing the backs of the legs, the low back. And if you have any tightness here in the backs of your legs, into the hamstrings, then bending the knees a little bit more. Remembering to be kind to ourselves here, not needing to lock the legs. And in fact, we never want to lock the knees completely. Slowing this down, bringing hands to the floor. We'll deepen the bend, inhaling, reverse swan dive. Exhaling, bringing hands together at the heart. We're going to take a step on our mat. So we're going to turn towards the long side of the mat, letting toes point out. Toes and knees are going in the same direction. We're going to flow through sunflowers, lifting arms to the sky. So we're creating a 5-pointed star. And then as we exhale, we're going to hinge forward, having a bend in the knees, and we'll draw a big circle with the arms, inhaling up. So as we exhale, lowering down, creating a long spine. So we'll hinge at the hips rather than worrying about rounding down. We're not worried about how far down we get. And as we circle those arms, maybe challenging ourselves to switch which hand goes in front. So sometimes we might not remember what we just did. So paying attention as we start to warm the body. You might really feel yourself getting warm right here. Making your own heat, your own sun. Just a few more like this. And then we'll make this next one the last one. We'll come into our sun goddess pose. So bending those knees, coming to whatever depth feels good to your hips, arms come out to the side, and we're going to open and expand across the chest. Knees are tracking out in the same direction as the toes. Rooting down through the big toes. Inhaling, lifting. Exhaling now, bringing hands together at the heart. And we'll step those feet in. We're coming into chair flow. So we'll set up with our feet about hip distance apart so we can be nice and stable. Inhaling, and then exhaling to sit back into that imaginary chair. Arms could come forward to prayer or to thighs. And then inhaling, we'll lift. Exhaling, we'll sit back and down, choosing your arm option. And as we come into that chair, letting the weight of the body go towards the hips. So remembering we're sitting the weight back, spine is in its neutral curvature. So I'll turn to the side for just a moment. We want to be really careful that our spine is long. So rather than pushing the booty out or rounding down, finding that neutral spine. So if we have to come up a little bit higher, choosing that. And then every time we lower, we're going to press the heels down into the floor to come back up. So we'll root down to rise tall. You can move at your own pace, one breath for one movement, using the in-breath to lift, the exhale to sit down, maybe pausing for a moment for an extra breath cycle to create some strength in those legs. Being very aware, keeping your attention on this movement rather than just going through an autopilot type of flow. You might stay with this flowing movement, or if you'd like, we can come on to either the toes on one foot or on both feet, creating a little bit of a balance challenge. We're on the balls of the feet. Arms can stay forward. You can bring them to prayer. Maybe feeling some quaking in the legs. We're creating that strength. And then pressing heels down. We'll inhale. Bringing hands together at the heart. So we're nice and warm right now. And we're going to add on a little bit. We'll take a big breath in. And then exhaling, coming into forward fold. Stepping the left foot back. Coming into a high lunge. Right knee is over the ankle. And we're going to bring that left heel down onto the floor. So we're stepping up for warrior. Walking hands up that front thigh. We're coming into warrior one. And you can adjust your feet if you need to. So maybe walking that left foot out a little bit so we have a little wider base, or you can bring it closer to the front. But making sure that both feet are pressing down equally, that left heel is pushing into the mat, and we'll square our shoulders to the top edge, lifting arms, maybe into traditional warrior arms if that feels okay. Or if we'd like, we can add in a little bit of shoulder mobility here. Inhaling that left arm up, and then bringing the fingertips behind and between the shoulder blades. From here, we could either take a hold of that left elbow, getting a bit of a tricep stretch, or bring that right arm back and around, reaching for the fingertips. They might touch or they might not. And if this is too much, returning to any of those other arm variations, maybe even prayer position. letting the breath be steady. If you notice your breath is getting labored, then maybe backing out a little bit. Remembering Ahimsa. Then unraveling those arms, coming back into warrior one, traditional arms. We'll inhale, turning the torso towards the left, towards the long edge of the mat, maybe taking a wider step with that left foot. Arms can come back to prayer. And we want to check in here. Shoulders should be directly over hips. So if we caught ourselves leaning forward, then coming more upright, maybe bringing arms to shoulder height. Turning our gaze out over the right fingertips if that feels okay. We'll peek down, making sure we can see the big toe. If we start to notice that right knee leaning in, maybe giving it a little bit of help, really strengthening that front thigh. And then we'll turn the left palm or the right palm to the sky. We'll inhale, coming into reverse warrior. Right hand is directly over the shoulder, choosing to look up or turning the head down. Exhaling, we'll come back into warrior two, letting our gaze come out over those fingertips once again. We'll bend the front elbow, bringing forearm down to the thigh, coming into side angle pose. Left hand can stay on the hip or opening that arm up as we still keep those hips sitting down. So the temptation here might be to lift up a little bit, but as best as we can, sitting down while we keep the right side of the body strong. So we want to be really careful that we're not just dumping the torso into that leg. Inhaling, we'll come back into warrior two. Cartwheeling those arms, coming into our runner's lunge, and stepping the right foot back to meet the left. From here, we have an option to maybe come into a three-legged dog. We could move from child's pose to kneeling plank, or even from our down dog to our plank on toes. So taking just a few moments of stillness or movement, your choice. Honoring your body, remembering that Ahimsa, so if your body needs more, offering a little bit more, but if your body needs a little bit less, then choosing to rest or choosing to check in. We'll all come back either into a child's pose or downward facing dog, and I've just switched directions just so we can do the other side. Getting ready to take a walk to the front of our mat. So engaging through the core. If we're in downward facing dog, we'll find that core connection, or we could do this from child's pose. We'll start to walk the feet to the front of the mat, coming into a forward fold, keeping the knees soft. Inhaling, reverse swan dive. Exhaling, hands come to the heart. Inhaling, bring palms to touch overhead. Exhaling, leading with the heart as we come into forward fold. This time stepping the right foot back. Left knee is over the ankle. We're in our runner's lunge. And we'll pivot on the rear foot, placing that heel on the ground, walking hands up the front thigh. So the left foot is facing the front of the mat. Right foot can be at an angle, angled up towards the right side of the mat. Again, making sure both feet have equal weight. And adjusting your feet. So if you feel at all unstable, maybe stepping that right foot a little wider or bringing that foot closer to the front. We'll inhale to sit into our warrior one on this side. So we might choose those traditional warrior arms, or we can take that option for more shoulder mobility. So we could inhale, right arm to the sky, bringing the fingertips between the shoulder blades, taking the left hand to the right elbow, getting a really nice tricep stretch. We might choose to stay there, or we could take the left hand, looping it behind the body. And if fingertips touch, that's great. And if not, that's fine too. Allowing the breath to be steady, and we'll soften our gaze. Remembering, if you notice yourself holding your breath, backing out a little bit. Honoring any messages from your body. And then we'll slowly release those arms. So not letting them slingshot out of there. Coming back into traditional warrior one. We'll inhale, opening into warrior two. So again, you might want to make a little more room for the body, stepping the right foot back, being aware of shoulders over hips, turning our gaze out over the left fingertips. And anytime you need to, releasing those arms down, maybe giving a few swaying movements or bringing hands to prayer. Coming into reverse warrior, we'll turn that front palm up, inhaling, lifting that left hand towards the sky. And the right hand can be on the back leg, or you can bring it behind the lower back, still sitting down into those strong legs. So upper body's reaching up, but legs are still grounded in that warrior position. Exhaling, coming back into warrior two, reaching those fingertips away from each other. And then bending the left elbow, bringing the forearm down to the thigh for side angle pose. Right hand can stay here or open, feeling that chest opening, heart opening towards the sky. And again, always turning your head in any direction that feels good. So if it doesn't feel comfortable looking up, then looking down. To come out of this, we'll plant the right foot into the ground, and using the right side of the body, we'll inhale back into warrior two. Cartwheeling our arms, coming into a runner's lunge. And stepping left foot back to meet the right. We'll lower knees to the floor, and we'll all come into child's pose. Any variation that allows us to turn our awareness inward. And we'll just notice any difference between this child's pose and the first one that we did. Taking just a breath or two here. And then preparing to come into our last downward facing dog of the practice. We'll tuck toes under, lifting the hips, and either staying still or if you'd like to add some movement. So again, you might choose to lift one leg to the sky for a three-legged dog. Or you could flow from that down dog to plank or child's pose to kneeling plank. Honoring what your body might need right now. And then coming back into downward facing dog, walking hands back to meet the feet. Softening the bend in our knees as we inhale, reverse swan dive. Exhaling, hands come to the heart. And we're going to get ready for a little bit of balance. So for today's balance, we have the option of doing either dancer pose or quad stretch, or any variation between those two options. So first, stepping the left foot forward, coming onto the right toes. And this might, right here, be enough of a balance. So we'll soften both knees, so having a little bend in the front and a little bend in the back. And we're on the rear toes. Hands can always be anything that feels good to you. So they could be at prayer out to the sides. So you might just want to play around with maybe shifting the weight forward and back on that rear toe, or maybe staying right here without even adding that little bit of movement, but finding a sense of stability and balance in this kickstand. So remember, this isn't the way we normally stand, so maybe playing with this balance, and we can adjust the feet to find where we're safe or where we feel safe. And then only if you want to take it further, you could either bend the knee more, either reaching for the ankle for a quad stretch and maybe holding onto the wall if that's appropriate, or you can hold, bring your thumb to the bottom of the foot, letting the fingers go to the top of the foot. And if it's appropriate, maybe hinging forward, coming into dancer pose. So that left arm could extend forward, right foot is kicking into the right hand. We'll set our gaze. Staying anywhere that you feel most successful. And if you come out of the pose before you're ready, always knowing that you can revisit the pose. And then as you are ready, coming out, and then resetting the body. So we'll do that other side, but before we go to the other side, adding in any extra movements, a lot of times I like to maybe add in some hip circles or shake out the arms or the legs, and doing what's appropriate for you right now. So adding in a little bit of movement. When we balance on one leg, whichever leg is that standing leg is getting a lot of work. So for our dancer, it was the left hip into the glute medius. So especially for runners or anybody who does a lot of activity like running. And actually, for most of us, we have weak glutes, so this is a good way to strengthen our glutes. Our glutes actually get kind of lazy from sitting. So we'll get ready to try that other side. So this time stepping the right foot forward, coming onto left toes. Again, you might choose to stay with our kickstand. And both sides of the body are a little different, so you might choose a different option than you did on the other side. So that next option was to bend the knee. And you could either stay right here, that might be enough of a balance, or you could reach for your foot or even your pant leg, or if you have a strap, you could loop a strap around the foot. Or to come more into dance, remember the left thumb comes on the bottom of the foot, the fingertips come around the top of the foot, and then maybe hinging forward. So there's no right or wrong place to be for this pose. It's all about practicing and finding what fits our body today, not needing to be in any particular place in this pose. Not trying to make our bodies fit the poses, but make the poses fit our bodies. I'm trying to stay wherever you are with a sense of equanimity. And then coming out of it whenever you're ready. So little hip circles, maybe a little twist. Swinging the arms from side to side. Do some shoulder rolls. So after our balance and creating the strength that we did throughout our practice, we're getting ready to come back down to the floor. Big inhale, we'll bring our arms overhead and maybe turning our gaze up toward the fingertips, or you could have your gaze forward. We might find a little bit of a back bend here if that feels appropriate. And then as we exhale, deep bend in the knees, hinging at the hips, forward fold. Crown of the head is reaching down towards the floor. And then walking our knees underneath the body, we're going to come all the way down onto our bellies. So first, just resting the forehead on the backs of the hand, legs are long, and we're going to explore some back strengthening work. We're going to do a couple variations of locust pose. So the first one, we'll just place our forehead on the backs of the hands, legs are long. We'll start to firm the thighs. You might notice the low belly lifting away from the floor, and maybe even the knees lifting away from the floor. On our in-breath, we'll lift the hands and the forehead as one unit, lifting the chest away from the floor as well. Feeling all that strength, the low back and the mid back, the upper back as we lift. I'll stay here for one more breath cycle. And then very slowly, lowering with control, we'll turn our head to one side. Whichever direction you've turned your head, bringing that leg out to that side as well. And then inhaling, we'll come back to center. You can repeat what we just did. Or if you'd like, bringing hands down next to the body. And again, first creating that integrity in the body. So we're lengthening the legs, we're drawing the navel in, engaging the glutes, lifting the chin and the chest away from the floor. Hands can stay on the floor or maybe interlacing the hands behind the back. And you might choose to add a lift of the legs. If you're lifting the legs, hugging inner ankles and inner thighs towards one another, even if they don't actually touch. It's a dynamic movement. We're opening across the chest and the shoulders, especially if we have those arms up and interlaced, the fingers interlaced. And very slowly we'll exhale, coming all the way, melting all the way down to the floor, turning the head to the opposite side this time, bringing that knee out to the side as well, letting the spine neutralize. And then extending that leg, we'll bring the forehead back down towards the floor. You might place the hands underneath the forehead again. We'll bend both knees, and we'll just let the feet sway from side to side. So kind of like that windshield wiper movement, or you might think about this like seaweed on the bottom of the ocean. Just letting the feet go from one side to the other. And coming back to middle, we'll bring the feet down to the floor. We'll place hands next to the shoulders, and we'll push up. And we'll set our hips back into a child's pose. Finding another opportunity to elongate the spine. Inhaling, we'll come up into our seated posture. We're going to come into a butterfly pose, and for a butterfly, you might sit up on your support once again. So whether it's a pillow, a couch cushion, a block, bringing soles of the feet together, letting the knees drop to the side and not trying to force them. Just let them open up naturally, holding on at the calves or coming all the way down to the ankles. As we lengthen the spine, crown of the head is reaching towards the sky. And only if it's appropriate, you might hinge forward. So kind of like we did in our swan dive when we hinged at the hips rather than worrying about getting the head or the chest all the way down to the floor. So we want to keep that integrity in our spine rather than rounding the spine. Perhaps closing the eyes, bringing our awareness inward as we stretch the inner thighs and again, allow some opening into the pelvis and the hips. Checking in with the shoulders, making sure we're not creating tension. We'll relax them back and down. Softening the jaw, maybe moving the muscles of the face around, releasing any tension. The jaw muscles or the cheeks or around the eyes. If eyes are closed, we'll let them softly open, fluttering back open, and we'll bring the knees together. We'll lift off of our block, setting it to the side, and we'll make our way onto our back. So first coming into a bent knee position, and then holding onto one leg, using that leg to help us lower onto our backs. Giving the knees a little bit of a hug. Rocking side to side. Bringing feet down to the floor. We're going to inhale, lifting that right leg to the sky. We'll hold on behind the thigh or the calf muscle, and we'll flex the foot so that the heel is pushing up towards the sky. Toes are drawing down towards the knee. And then moving through that ankle, we'll point and flex the foot. Maybe making some music into that ankle joint if we're cricking and cracking. And circling just a few times in each direction. And then crossing the right knee over the left. So they're directly one over the other. We're going to come into some eagle crunches. So the right knee and the right leg is over the left. So that means we'll take the right arm under the left. So crossing the arms, and then interlacing them. If that's too confusing or too much, we can bring fingertips behind the ears. And then lifting the feet away from the floor, we'll inhale, opening up, and then exhaling, crunching in. Inhaling to open, and exhaling to draw in. Remembering, we can bring fingertips behind the ears if that feels better, or you could even uncross the legs. We're moving nice and slowly, not trying to rush this, and we only need to do a small amount of repetitions. We're not going to be here for a terribly long amount of time, but we'll feel it. One more time on this side. And then unlacing those arms, we'll bring the left foot down to the floor. We'll uncross the legs and just pause for a moment, noticing how we're feeling. Inhaling, we'll lift the left leg to the sky, holding on anywhere that you'd like. We'll start with that flexed foot, toes drawing down towards the shin, heel reaching up. So when we have our foot flexed, we're getting into the calf muscle and to the hamstring, and we can keep this knee bent as much as we'd like. And we'll start to point and flex. And add some circles, going in both directions. And then coming into our crunches. So this time taking the left knee over the right. Remember, we've got our knees crossed as if we were sitting in a chair. This time, left arm crosses under right. We can interlace the arms, or you can come to fingertips behind the ears, if that feels better. And then drawing everything in, we'll inhale, opening, and then exhaling, crunching in. Moving with your breath, moving with awareness. And remember, when we move mindfully, we're focusing on quality over quantity, so we don't need to do as many repetitions. Just 2 more like this, or pausing anytime you need to. And then coming back down, we'll release everything, letting the feet be as wide as the mat. And we'll come to some more of those windshield wipers, knees swaying gently from one side to the other. And then coming back to center, we'll bring feet in alignment with the hips. And we're going to come into a bridge pose. Arms are next to the body. We'll walk those feet in. We'll inhale, starting to peel the tailbone. So just noticing as we inhale, that tailbone peels away from the floor. And then the lower back, one vertebra at a time, as we lift up, creating a straight line from knees to shoulders. Pushing the feet down to lift those hips up. Having a comfortable space between the chin and the chest, so being really mindful of that. And if at any point this feels uncomfortable to the neck, then lowering back down. We're strengthening the back of the body into the low back, the hamstrings, while we open those hip flexors, opening the low belly that we just worked on. And then we'll slowly exhale, coming back down to the floor. Pausing for just a moment. And you can either stay here if that was enough, or if you'd like, your body needs a little bit more, we can do one more bridge. So rooting down through the feet, connecting our bodies to the earth as we lift the hips. And again, remembering Ahimsa, non-harming. So if your body had enough, lowering back down. Or if our bodies want a little more today, we could interlace the fingers underneath the glutes, walking the shoulders underneath the chest. Finding a little more opening, a little more of a back bend here. Still squeezing inner legs towards each other, at least dynamically. They don't actually have to touch. It's just that strength rather than letting the legs just flop open. We'll take another breath, maybe 2 here in this pose. And then if you'd like, coming onto the toes, you might lift the heels away from the floor. And then to come out of this, we'll backtrack. So if we lifted the heels, lowering heels down to the floor, we'll unlace the fingers and slowly come all the way back down. Taking a moment or two just to allow the spine to settle back towards the earth. And then choosing either to come back to a knees to chest position, or we could find a happy baby, lifting feet towards the sky with knees wider than the ribs, holding on behind the legs or reaching up for the feet. Rocking side to side like that happy baby, or staying still like a dead bug. And lowering feet down to the floor. We'll bring soles of the feet together into a reclined version of butterfly. So a little bit different than when we were seated. Completely taking the low back out of this combination. So when we were seated upright, we had to be concerned about the natural curve in the low back. So now we're in a much more passive version of this pose. If you'd like, you could always place something underneath the outer thighs, or if this isn't feeling good today, finding another place that does feel good to your body. Then you might choose to stay here for your final relaxation. Or if you'd like, bringing feet back onto the mat with knees bent. Or you could extend the legs into more of a traditional final relaxation with the feet flopping out to the side, palms turning up in a gesture of receiving. Again, noticing any areas that might be holding on to some tension. Using the breath to dissolve it away. So we allow the body to be heavy on the mat. Feeling the earth holding and supporting our bodies. As we come into the most important pose of our practice, Shavasana. Choosing to stay right here if you have the time. Or you can begin to invite some movement to the body, wiggling fingers and toes, tracing the thumb over the fingertips, bending the knees to roll to one side in baby pose. Pressing the top hand into the floor to help us come to an upright seat. Rooting down through the tailbones to the sitting bones as we reach the crown of the head up towards the sky, getting as long and as tall as we possibly can, the tallest we've been all day. Bring hands together at the space of the heart and inhaling to lift the heart, exhaling, bowing the chin to the chest, offering a moment in gratitude for all the ways that you show up for yourself, all the ways that the body shows up for you. The divine light within me honors the divine light within you. Namaste. Thank you so much for sharing your practice with me today. Have a wonderful day. Namaste.